You know, it's funny, I was wearing a t-shirt that said Walt Disney World on it, and I was like, whoa, that's a little bit too much. It's gonna be too much Disney, like right in their face during the video. So I put this one on. Hi everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're going over month 2 of the Cotton Cuts 2021 Spring Sparkle and Shine Mystery Quilt. I'm always going to do that. It's a mystery. What is it going to be? I don't know. Do we get any clues this month? Not really. Okay, so in today's tutorial, I will be going over the size small and the size large. Remember last month? We're going to forget about last month, and moving forward, we're going to do both the sizes in the same video. So for the size small, I am doing the garnet colorway. Somebody told me it's spelled garnet, but it's pronounced garnet. So I'm doing that one. For this one, you're going to make 2 different variations of blocks, and you're going to make 2 of each. So you're going to make 2 blocks that look like this. Nice, long, easy peasy strip. And you're going to make 2 blocks that look like this. Dun, dun, dun. The dreaded half square triangle. The half square triangle is not bad, but when you get the half square triangle meeting up in these points right here, we're going to have some bulky seams. Whether you're doing the small or the large, we're going to be dealing with some bulkier seams today. We're going to talk about how to get through it. Let the perfect points go. If you don't get perfect points today, that's okay. All right, that's okay. But you're gonna make 2 of these and 2 of the longer strip if you're doing the small size. If you're doing the large size, you're gonna have a bit more work and your strips are different. You're gonna make 4 strips that look like this. I think this is the right direction. You're gonna make 4 that look like this, 4 rectangles, and 4 rectangles that look like this. Super easy. So these ones come together very, very fast. These ones also come together very quickly because, again, they are all pre-cut for you. You don't have to cut out any of these triangles. Hallelujah, right? So these do come together quickly, but as you can see on the back, we do have some bulky seams where all of these things kind of meet up. I mean, you can see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of fabric that all meet up in one point right here. I know that for me, when I started quilting, that was always a pretty big challenge, so I'm gonna try to kind of guide you through it. The best advice I can give you, though, is just let perfectionism go. Just let it go. We don't need it. So for the large size, I am doing the quartz colorway, which is a very bright, very vibrant colorway I am loving. So if you haven't already signed up for the Cotton Cuts Mystery Quilt, you can still do it. I will have a link down below as well as a little code for you to get like a little free gift with your first month. I don't know what the process is if you sign up late. I'm assuming they just send it all to you quickly and then they'll catch you up on the next month. That's what I'm assuming. So you can still join in at any time. It's a very, very quick sew along. This is fantastic for any of you who want to make a quilt but you don't want to commit the time to it. This is your quilt. This is my quilt for sure. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. We have videos coming out every Monday and Thursday, all sewing related. Sometimes we throw in some other crafts in there. Sky's the limit here. It's a crafty channel. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, anything at all you want to say, leave them down in the comment section. I will have some timestamps down in the comment section, so that way if you're just focused on the large or the small, click on that timestamp and it's just going to take you straight there in the video. All right, let's get started. So first we're going to start with the small quilt, and we're going to start with this little half square triangle rectangle here. So using the colorway they gave you, make sure you still have this piece of paper from month 1. Use that and the pattern to lay out your block exactly as they say it. Now this can get a little confusing. I know I got kind of turned around with this a few times just because there's just a few different, half square triangles, and it's just easy for me to get confused, honestly. But there we go. This is how it's all laid out, just like this. You see we have 1, 2, 3, 4 half square triangles, and then we just have all in all 6 little blocks we're going to put together. So the first thing I'm going to do is go through all of my A and D pieces. So I have 1, 2, 3 little squares here made up of A and D, and I'm going to sew those together. So all we want to do is just fold these right sides together, and you should line up all the edges. Like I said, these are all pre-cut, so they should line up perfectly. And then we're just going to pin along that diagonal edge between them. If you are a little bit more ambitious and you don't want to use pins, you don't have to. You can just hold this together at the sewing machine. So go ahead and repeat that with the other 2 units. Okay, now we're going to take these 3 pinned units to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew along those pinned edges at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have these sewn together, let's just press it. I have the back of the D triangles up, so I'm the wrong side of the D triangles. So just press along those backs, and then pull open that D triangle and very gently finger press along the seam you just sewed. Don't pull on it. And then press and just leave it there for a few seconds. There you go. Now you have a nice little square made up of 2 triangles. Go ahead and repeat this for all 3 of your blocks. And if you'd like, you can give them a quick press on the back as well. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and add these back into my little unit here. This way, there we go. All right, so now the pattern's gonna have you take the top row, so our little triangle unit here, with our block A square, and we're gonna lay these right sides together and matching up along this center edge right here. You could add a pin here to hold them together. Now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along this pinned edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now lay this with the square wrong side up, and we're gonna press along that seam, and then flip the square up so the seam is behind the square unit, and finger press gently. Try to make sure you're keeping everything straight. You want this to stay a rectangle, not like a whoop, little wonky shape. And then I'm gonna give it a quick press on the back as well. Okay, now we can do the same thing with the F unit. So your F block, lay that right side together with your triangle unit, and make sure everything's lined up right. I mean, if you lay it like this, it's not gonna be right with the pattern. So stick with the pattern, and let's just lay these right sides together, lining up all the edges. It should, for the most part, line up pretty well. If it doesn't, then that's fine. Okay, now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along this pinned edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. So lay your F square wrong side up, press along that seam, fold your F square back so the seam is behind it, give it a very gentle finger press, trying to keep everything lined up as a rectangle, and then press along that seam. You can flip it over and then press the back. Now we're going to join these top 2 rows together. So make sure that they're lined up correctly. These squares should be opposite one another, just like that. And then fold them down right sides together. And when you do that, your seams should be pressed in opposite directions. So your bottom seam here should be pressed towards the left. The top seam should be going towards the right. And that will allow you to just kind of hug these seams together and fold them over one another. That's how you get perfect points. You nest those seams up. So I do the center seams first and put a pin there, and then I line up the rest of the edge. I'm most concerned about making sure the center is lined up. Okay, now we can take this to the sewing machine, sew along the pinned edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Lay your unit so that the block with the F block is wrong side up. So it's the middle row here is wrong side up. Press along that seam, and then just fold this up so the seam goes behind that middle row. Gently press. You should see that all the points match up pretty nicely. If they don't, it's not a big deal. You can always unpick it and redo it if it bugs you that much. However, little things we notice now are not things we'll necessarily notice in the end, so I would just let it go. All right, now let's work on this bottom row. So take your B and A units and lay them right sides together along their diagonal, and just add a pin to hold it in place and also to mark what seam you have to sew. And now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along this pinned edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Lay your little unit with the B triangle wrong side up, press along the seam, and then take your B triangle, push it back so that the seam goes behind it, gently press with your fingers, and then press with your iron. All right, here you go. Here's your little bottom row. Now let's just lay it out per the pattern and then fold them right sides together along their intersecting seam right here. Line it all up to the best of your ability. Add a pin. And now let's sew along this edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, now lay this so that the B triangle is wrong side up. give it a press. Press that seam behind that B triangle, and then press it with your iron. Okay, now we just have to attach this bottom row up to the rest of our unit, so just lay it all out like it's supposed to be. Once it's good, fold it up, right sides together. Once again, these seams should nest. They should be going in opposite directions. So just nest those seams up, tuck them in with one another. That also reduces the bulk right here because you can get some bulky seams if you don't nest them in opposite directions, which then kind of throws the whole thing off. So I pin the center first, and then I'll straighten out the rest of the edge and pin that. All right, let's go sew along this edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Lay your unit so that that middle row is wrong side up. Press along that seam, and we're just gonna push that seam behind the middle row. So gently fold it up and finger press, and then press with your iron. And you should have some pretty decent points here. I mean, I don't know if you can tell, but mine do not match up perfectly. I would say 4 of the 6 are good. These 2 are not so good, but that's fine. Doesn't bother me. But if it does bother you, that's perfectly fine. You can unpick it and redo it. So there you go. You're going to want to make 2 of these blocks. Next up, we have this long strip. This is a very, very quick and easy strip to put together. So as always, I like to just kind of lay it out first, just so I can see it. It's easier for me to follow along if I have it laid out first. All right, so starting on this little flying goose over here, we're going to start with our A unit, and it's going to go up to the top right of our D unit. And we're just going to lay it right sides down. Again, everything should match up completely perfect. And now we're going to sew along this edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, now lay your unit so that the smaller A triangle is wrong side up. Press along that seam, and then gently finger press the seam behind the A triangle very gently. It's very easy to stretch this all out right here, so just gentle fingers. And then I'm going to give it a press on the back as well. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing on the other side with our E triangle. So let's just lay that right side down on the other side of our D triangle in the center. Pin those together. Okay, now let's sew along this pinned edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. So lay this block with your E triangle wrong side up. Press along that seam. Then finger press the seam behind the E triangle, nice and gently, and then press again. Okay, now we just have to attach this long E strip with our flying goose so they match up with the colors. Lay them right sides together along the left edge of your flying goose, and then just add a pin here to hold it together. And now let's sew along this short edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now take your unit and lay the long strip wrong side up. Press along your seam, and then press so that the seam is behind that long rectangle, just like that. So there we go. If you're doing the small quilt, you should have 2 of the fun block up top, 2 of these long skinny blocks down below, and you're done for this month. If you're doing the large quilt, you have a few more blocks to make. Obviously, it's a bigger quilt. Let's start with the easiest block first. So for this block, you're going to have a long strip from your A fabric and a long strip from your E fabric. And we're just going to line them up right along the center, just like that, nice and easy. So fold them right sides together. Do your best to line up the edges. Try not to pull too hard on either one of these. They can be pretty stretchy, so just try to get them the same exact length, but then don't pull any further. So I'm just going to add a couple pins to hold it together. And now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along that long edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, now lay your unit so that the A fabric is wrong side up. Press along that seam, and then push the seam behind the A unit and press down. I know for those of you who really prefer to press towards the dark side, this might be painful. Honestly, press whichever way you like, but the pattern does suggest you press towards the A block, and since we might be nesting these seams in a future step, I'm gonna stick with the pattern. There we go, that's nice and easy. You're gonna make a total of 4 of these this month. All right, now let's lay out the next block. Now this one, I'll be honest, I did kind of get confused every now and then, not because of the pattern, just because of placement. So it's really important that you look at the pattern and figure out placement for all of these triangles because you want it to stay the right way. All of these are gonna come together in a really cool way in the end. So we want this to, we wanna follow the pattern here. Normally, I would encourage you guys to be free and change up however you want. But since we don't know how this is going to be later, let's follow the instructions. Or not. You do you. Okay, so now I have it all laid out just like the pattern has it. Now let's sew it all together. So let's first start with this top row right here and from the center. So take your center D triangle, lay it right side up, grab your upper right A triangle that's pointing down, and lay it right side up. So we're going to attach them along the seam right here. Fold down that A triangle so that it's right sides together with the D triangle. And again, because they're pre-cut, everything should line up. Totally perfect. Oh, that's so satisfying. All right, now let's go sew along this pinned edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now lay your unit with the D triangle wrong side up. Give that seam a press. And then we're going to finger press that seam behind that D triangle. Gentle here. Lots of stretchy edges. Be gentle. And then just press it with your iron. And give it a press on the back as well to help it all lay flat. All right, next we're going to take the other A triangle and attach it to the top left edge of our D triangle. So just like before, fold it down, right sides together. It should still line up perfectly, even though we added this triangle over here. Everything should still look good. And now let's sew along this edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, once again, lay your D triangle wrong side up, give it a press, and then gently press that seam behind the D triangle. I know it can get a little bulky here at the top. You're gonna want to press it behind this other A triangle. But the thing about pressing it this way, I don't know if you can tell on the screen, but it really makes the D triangle down here kind of pop up. It gives it a 3-dimensional look. So I encourage you to try to get that seam behind the D unit. You just have to be gentle. I have a nice hot iron. I have it on the highest setting it'll go, no steam, and that seems to help. But by doing this, you are going to get a bit of a bulky seam right here at the top of your D triangle. And now we're going to add on our little E triangles to the bottom corners right here. So I'm just going to take my E triangle here on the right, line it all up, pin in place. I'm going to also add my triangle down here to the left and just sew them on and press them at the same time just to save some time. There we go. Now I'm going to go sew along both of these pinned edges at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now lay your unit so that the backs of your E triangles are wrong side up. Press along both of those edges and then press the E triangle so that the seam is behind it. So this should be nice and easy. Just try not to stretch anything too much. Give it a press with your iron. I'm going to go prep the other side over here. And then press that with my iron. You can also give it a press on the back just to really get those seams down nice and flat. Okay, there you go. Your top row is now done. Now let's work on this bottom row. We're going to start with the center triangle just like we did up here. So your center A triangle should be pointing down. Take one of your D triangles that's pointing up. We're going to start with the one on the left and then just flip it right sides together along that left edge and then add a pin. And now let's sew along this edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. So take your unit and lay the wrong side of your A triangle facing up, give it a press, and then finger press that seam behind your A triangle, and then press it with your iron. So now we're going to add this D triangle to the other side of our A triangle, laying them right sides together and lining everything up. So now lay your unit so that the A triangle's wrong side up. Press along that seam you just sewed. Flip up your A triangle and finger press that seam behind it. Again, I know it gets pretty bulky at the top of this triangle. I mean, I think it's fine if you press the seam behind these triangles, but following the pattern, we're gonna press it behind that center triangle and then press it from the back as well, doing your best to get that pretty thick point as flat as possible. Okay, now we just have to add on our small A triangles to the sides. So line them up the way you want them. If you have a print or anything in a direction, make sure you think about that. And now let's fold these right sides together. And I'm going to do both of them at once, just to save some time. All right, now let's sew along both of these edges at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, lay your unit so that those small triangles are wrong side up. I'm gonna pull it over here because my iron doesn't quite reach. Now press those seams and then finger press it so those seams go behind those small A triangles. All right, here we go. Now we just have to put it all together. Pretty easy. These spots right here do get a little bulky. You'll be okay. So let's flip these so that they are right sides together. Make sure you have the right, row on top. Flip it down. You can try to line up your triangle points right here. So I'm just kind of flipping it so that, this triangle on the bottom, this white one here, and this pink one all line up, and the points line up exactly. So you can just kind of feel it with your finger. And then I'll add a pin where those line up, and then I'm gonna do the same thing over here. Just trying to line up the points on these triangles as perfectly as possible. Okay, so these seams right here get pretty bulky. It's pretty bulky, so as we sew over that, you need to slow down because your machine's gonna naturally try to push it away, and then you're gonna get some wavy seams here. So we don't wanna do that. So as we get to these steps, just slow down and make sure you're keeping that scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. On these spots here, you can see the stitching where the tip of your triangle is right there. So you wanna get just next to it in the seam. I wouldn't suggest going right over that cross section because then you might lose your tip, but you just wanna go right next to it, but staying in the seam. Okay, so take your bottom row and lay it wrong side up. Now let's just press along this seam. And I can already tell that this is not going to be perfect, but that's okay. So then just fold up that bottom row, push down so the seam goes behind it. And I know this right here, that is some bulk. That is a bulky seam. Just press it down with your iron. Give it a good press on the back as well. All right, there you go. You're gonna wanna make 4 of these total. All right, that is the end of month 2. If you made the small version, you had to make 2 of these little cuties, and 2 of these strips as well. If you made the large version, you made 4 of these very easy strips, and then 4 of these a little bit more challenging flying geese, half square triangle. I mean, I guess none of these are half square triangles. This is just a bunch of triangles, but it's a little bit more challenging. Let me know how you did. Let me know if you encountered some bumps on those, thicker seams. Either way, it comes together so fast. The fact that we don't have to cut it out, the fact that all we have to do is sew it and press it, it's so fast. So I am wondering how many of you out there are doing more than one of these at the same time. So for example, for me, I signed up for the large colorway, but then I ordered the small colorway so I could do that with you as well. And I've seen quite a few of you comment that you couldn't decide on a colorway, so you got started with one and then you ended up ordering another one. Or you really like the large, but you also want to make the small. So how many of you guys are doing that? How many of us are going to have multiple quilt tops? We're going to have to figure out how to bind quilts. So in month 9. You know what, we're not gonna think about that right now. We're just gonna think about how easy this month was. So even if you're doing 2 or more at a time, it's a very easy month to sew. So I hope that you enjoyed sewing with me today. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day. Have a great week. Get out there and make something. Bye.